It all started with a text notification that I wish I hadn't seen. My heart skipped a beat when I noticed a message from someone I trusted completely, or at least I thought I did. The words on the screen were innocent enough, but the tone felt off, like a tiny crack in a mirror that suddenly made everything look distorted. I tried to brush it off at first, telling myself I was just overthinking things, but the feeling lingered, gnawing at me like an itch I couldn't scratch. The more I tried to ignore it, the heavier the weight in my chest grew until I finally decided I couldn't anymore. When I confronted them, the air in the room shifted instantly. What began as a calm conversation quickly spiraled into something raw and unfiltered. Voices rose, words cut deep, and the safe space we once shared started to crumble beneath us. I remember the look in their eyes, hurt, confusion, maybe even guilt. But there was also something else, a stubbornness that made me realize this wasn't going to be a simple fix. I felt exposed, like every secret I'd hidden was suddenly on display. The argument wasn't just about the message anymore. It was about everything bottled up underneath, the unspoken doubts, the little lies, the moments I had ignored because I wanted to believe in us so badly. It was as if the ground beneath us was shifting, and neither of us knew how to find solid footing. At one point, voices cracked and tears welled up. I couldn't tell if it was anger or pain anymore. The room felt smaller, the silence that followed even louder. We both sat there, breathing heavily, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I realized then how fragile trust really is. How one moment, one word, can unravel years of memories and shared dreams. The argument was like a storm we hadn't prepared for, and we were both getting drenched in the fallout. Despite the chaos, there was a strange clarity in the middle of it all. I saw sides of us I'd never noticed, the cracks and imperfections beneath the surface. It was painful but honest, like finally peeling back a mask we'd both been wearing. The conversation dragged on into the night, each exchange more intense than the last. I found myself questioning everything, the past, the present, and what the future might hold if we couldn't rebuild what was broken. Somewhere between the anger and the tears, I realized that the argument wasn't just about mistrust, it was about fear. Fear of losing something precious, fear of being vulnerable, and fear of facing uncomfortable truths we'd both been avoiding. The more we talked, the more I understood how tangled our emotions were, wrapped up in years of shared experiences and unspoken expectations. It was messy, confusing, but undeniably real. At one point, I looked away, unable to hold their gaze anymore. The silence that fell was suffocating, filled with all the words we didn't say and the ones that hurt too much to speak aloud. I felt my hands tremble as I tried to steady my breathing. The room spun slightly, and I wondered if this was how everything would end, with us breaking apart in a storm of doubts and unmet needs. But then, amidst the chaos, a flicker of something else appeared, a tiny spark of hope. Maybe this argument was painful, but it was also a chance to confront what was really going on instead of burying it deeper. I wasn't sure if we could fix things yet. The wounds felt too fresh and the hurt too raw, but I knew one thing for certain: pretending everything was fine was no longer an option. The night stretched on, the city outside quiet and unaware of the storm raging between us. We sat in silence, each lost in our own thoughts and fears, wondering what tomorrow might bring. I thought back to the early days, when trust felt like a given, not a fragile thread we had to guard so carefully. It was hard to believe how quickly things had changed, how easily doubt had crept in. Despite the heaviness, there was a strange comfort in sharing the pain. For all the hurt, it felt like we were finally being honest with each other in a way we hadn't been before. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap the argument had created, but fear held me back. Fear that my words might make things worse, or that I'd be rejected if I showed how vulnerable I truly felt. The clock ticked past midnight, and exhaustion began to settle in. Our voices had quieted, replaced by a shared weariness that spoke volumes about how much this had taken out of us. I looked over at them, noticing the same tiredness in their eyes. Maybe, just maybe, we were both scared but still willing to fight for what we had, even if it meant facing the uncomfortable truth head-on. The argument had changed everything, but it had also opened a door to vulnerability, to honesty, and possibly to healing, if we were brave enough to walk through it together. I didn't know what the future held, and the uncertainty was terrifying. But as the night wore on, I realized that trust wasn't about perfection, it was about facing the cracks and deciding whether to mend them or walk away. And so, with a heart heavy yet hopeful, I waited for the morning light, wondering if it would bring clarity or more questions to the fragile bond between us. The silence between us was no longer just absence of sound. It was a space filled with possibilities, fears, and unspoken promises waiting to be made or broken. Every thought that raced through my mind was tangled with memories, the laughter, the shared secrets, and the moments that had once felt unbreakable. I realized how much I had taken for granted, assuming trust was a given instead of something earned and nurtured every day. The argument wasn't just a fight. It was a mirror reflecting everything we had been avoiding, forcing us to confront the truth about ourselves and each other. I wondered if we could find our way back, or if this was the beginning of the end, a fracture too wide to ever truly heal. The weight of that question pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe, but I knew I couldn't run from it anymore. As dawn crept through the curtains, painting the room in soft light, I felt the rawness of the night still clinging to my skin like a second layer. I caught their eye across the room, and for a moment, the anger and hurt softened into something quieter, a shared vulnerability that was almost comforting. Neither of us spoke, but in that silence, I felt a fragile connection still holding us together, fragile but alive. It was a moment suspended in time, where the past and future blurred and only the present, with all its uncertainty, mattered. The night had tested us in ways I never expected, shaking the foundation of everything we thought we knew about each other. But it also revealed a deeper truth, that sometimes the hardest conversations are the ones that can save us if we're willing to listen. I didn't know if we would find our way back to the trust we once had, but I knew that pretending everything was fine wasn't an option anymore. The argument had stripped away the facade, leaving something raw and real in its place, painful, yes, but also full of possibility. I felt both lost and strangely hopeful, caught between the fear of losing everything and the chance to rebuild something stronger from the ashes. The road ahead was uncertain, and I didn't know if we were ready to walk it together, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were at least facing the same direction. As the morning light grew brighter, I realized that trust isn't a destination, it's a journey, and we had just taken the first difficult steps. The argument that changed everything wasn't the end, but maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something new. I didn't have all the answers, and I still had so many questions, but I knew one thing: I couldn't go back to pretending anymore. That night taught me that trust is fragile, yes, but also resilient, if we're brave enough to confront the cracks instead of hiding from them. And so, with a heart full of doubt, but also a flicker of hope, I waited for what came next, knowing that whatever it was, it would change everything. The silence that followed the argument was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with the weight of unspoken apologies and the aching need to be understood. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the chasm the fight had carved between us, but fear and pride held me back, trapping me in a cage of my own making. Every memory of happier times played like a bittersweet soundtrack to the turmoil inside me, making it harder to let go or move forward. I realized that trust isn't just about believing in someone else. It's about believing in the possibility of forgiveness, understanding, and second chances. The argument had ripped open wounds we didn't know were there, exposing vulnerabilities that neither of us was prepared to face so honestly. But in that rawness, there was a strange beauty, a chance to rebuild something more authentic and true if only we dared to try. I looked again at the person across from me, seeing not an enemy or a stranger, but someone just as scared and broken as I was. It was a painful realization, but also a hopeful one, that maybe we could heal together if we were willing to be honest and open. The night had changed everything, but it hadn't destroyed us. That much was clear, even if the path forward was shrouded in uncertainty. I didn't know where we were headed, but I knew that pretending everything was fine wasn't an option anymore, not for either of us. Trust, I realized, is a delicate dance between holding on and letting go, between vulnerability and strength. And sometimes, that dance requires stepping into the storm, even when you don't know if you'll make it through unscathed. That night we stepped into the storm together, and though the journey was far from over, it was a start, the kind of start that can change everything. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the tension slowly ebb away, but knowing the work was just beginning. The argument had forced us to confront the cracks, and now it was up to us to decide whether to mend them or walk away. In that quiet moment, I felt a fragile thread of hope weaving between us, tenuous but real. I didn't have the answers, but I was willing to try, to face the hard truths, to listen more, and to rebuild what had been broken. The night had changed everything, and in that change lay both pain and possibility. I opened my eyes and looked at them again, seeing not just the person I argued with, but the person I still cared about deeply. It was a complicated feeling, tangled with hurt and hope, fear and longing. And as the first light of dawn spilled into the room, I realized that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where trust would be earned, lost, and possibly regained. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt ready to face it. Because sometimes, the most difficult arguments aren't the end, they're the turning point that changes everything. And as I sat there, heart pounding and thoughts racing, I knew that this argument was ours, the one that would shape the story of us, for better or worse. What happens next, that part is still unwritten. But I'm here, ready to face it, one fragile step at a time. The night has passed, but the echoes of that argument still linger in the quiet moments, a reminder that trust is never guaranteed, only earned. And as I hold onto that truth, I wonder if we can find our way back, or if the distance between us has become too wide to cross. The story isn't over, and somehow that feels both terrifying and hopeful all at once. I don't have all the answers, but maybe that's okay. Maybe this is just the messy, imperfect beginning of something real. And in the end, isn't that what trust is? A fragile, beautiful risk we take, hoping to be understood and accepted for who we truly are. I'll keep holding on to that hope, even when the uncertainty feels overwhelming. Because sometimes, the argument that changes everything is the very thing that makes everything possible.